Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, yWhales, wherever in the world you are today. So again, really exciting things are happening in the world, despite there not being a lot of great news, I'd say, by mainstream media. My guest here today is Patrick Sweeney, and he needs no introduction from me. I'll let him introduce himself because very long storied career through Web 1, Web 2, and really in big data in and of itself. But the point I want to make as we're kind of getting into, really, I would say, this mature bear market that we're in today. Bitcoin is still a $20,000 stable coin at this point. But we're seeing the true innovators, the leaders of Web 1 and Web 2 finally showing up to Web 3. The asset class has matured enough. It's still extremely volatile, but we're starting to see the comparisons and connecting the dots between Web 1, Web 2, and where Web 3 should be going. And there's a lot of different pieces in there. And so, Patrick, I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce yourself, and then we'll kind of talk about like where you came in, because traditionally someone like yourself, I would assume would come in more at the blockchain level, and that's not the project you chose here. So, but please give us your background about how you got here today.
Well, thanks, Jay, and thanks, yWhales. It's been so rewarding and so much fun to be part of this community since the beginning. And Jay, like every other guest, I thank you for putting this together and for making this happen. You've changed a lot of lives because of it. So I'll give you the background, but the reason I started DaVinci, my current company, is to save the planet by mining crypto. So we'll get to that in a little bit, and I'll just give you a quick little background of where I started. So I spent 6 years training for the Olympics. I was a rower, single sculler, second in the Olympic trials, 10th in the world, raced 3 years of the World Cup, and then got dumb jock entries into most of the top business schools, and ended up getting an MBA. And then right out of school, or actually even my internship was with the largest real estate company in the world at the time, Trammell Crow, and they wanted to start a technology practice. And they just started one on the West Coast, and they wanted me to start the one on the East Coast. So I ended up being part of basically a two-man team, and we built about 6 million square feet of data center space. And it was during that time when I realized everybody was building data centers the way they were 20 yees ago. My dad was a key punch operator for Ross Perot, so I can still read Manila cards, which is a skill that's earned me at least one beer.
Most kids can't even read cursive nowadays, so you're well advanced on archaic languages.
So I decided to leave Trammell Crow, which was full of trepidation, and because my bosses were so good to me, and it was such a great opportunity, and the first thing they asked when I gave my resignation was, can we invest in your company? So it was really great to work for a bunch of solid people like that. And I started what was one of the first cloud hosting companies called Server Vault. And I ended up raising $30 million and of venture capital and debt, and put data centers in Northern Virginia, Northern California, in City West in Ireland, Dublin's big data center area, and we did the first cloud hosting. People didn't have to come to the facilities; they didn't have to own the gear. We did all the management monitoring. We completely changed the structure of the data center to more than triple the density of servers that you could put in, and it's really innovative stuff. Sold Server Vault, not because I wanted to, but because the venture capitalists had control of it at that point. And after that, went up to MIT, took some technology out of there, and started an RFID company. And this company called Odin, I ended up bootstrapping, and grew it over 10 years and sold it to a big international conglomerate. I owned 80% of the stock. The employees owned the other 20%. So everyone was happy. And we did everything from software and firmware development to creating our own custom chips to some really cool stuff for the DoD. And then after that, I started a social media company. So for anyone who skis at Vail Resorts and uses something called the Epic Mix, that was all of our technology that allows you to update photos automatically from their cameras and track your feet skied, and kind of like Strava for skiing.
Very cool.
And it's super cool, and it's still in use. And then after that, spent 6 years writing a book, which became #5 bestseller on the Wall Street Journal list, and called Fear is Fuel, and thought I was pretty much retired. And enjoying life. I've got a house in Chamonix and love rock climbing and skiing and paragliding and biking and everything that Cham has to offer, and was doing a bunch of speaking gigs, and that's when I got hit with basically the bug to start a company. So that was the timing for how I got to where we are today.
And I remember meeting you right when you're like you're looking for your next thing, and you kind of felt that this was your industry, but there was a couple other projects you were looking at, and it's really been interesting to see again a big data guy that you built data centers, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of square feet, and then racked vertically. So, I mean, the cluster densities are huge, but it's a very different world talking about, kind of how you manage big data in Web 1 versus where it's going in Web 3. What was kind of the, before we get into DaVinci and everything you've done, what was the biggest driver of which kind of got you to go like, I really need to do this. Like, I really need to put the skis down for a few minutes, and you're retired. You've living the life. You've exited. You've won. What was the kind of the core concept or issue that brought you back in?
I'll tell you, Jay. It goes back to skiing. Oddly enough, so in Chamonix there is probably the world's most famous off-piste or backcountry run. It's literally 12 miles long, 12 or 13 miles long. And you go up to the base of Mont Blanc and you ski down, you ski all the way to town. And so the first time I did this was 11 years ago. And I felt so insignificant when you're in the middle of these glaciers and the mountains, and it's just spectacular. And that was one of the things that drove me to fall in love with Cham. And when I first did it, when you finish without going to town, you can finish two ways: without going to town, or you can get on a train that goes down into town, or you can ski down into town. So it going on the train cuts a little bit of time and a little less skiing. So when conditions are bad, everyone takes the train. So I remember climbing up the first time. You climb up this set of stairs. There's a gondola about halfway down, but you've got to climb stairs to get to it. And I started climbing the stairs, and this is 2010. And I got a little ways up, and I saw a marker that said 2008. And then I climbed up a little more, and I saw a marker that said 2004. And then I climbed up a little more, and I saw a marker that said 2000. And these were the level of the glacier by year. And then you get all the way to the top, like 400 feet, and it says 1996 and 1991. And I couldn't believe it, right? I couldn't believe how much the glacier had deteriorated. And so that was me first getting there. And then we have a glacier right out in front of our house, so I can look out onto this glacier. And every year it just keeps getting smaller and smaller. And so my daughter and I became environmental activists, right? And became way more concerned about energy usage with data centers, about pollution from cars, about construction, greenhouse gases, and this is about the same time I started gambling with Bitcoin, right? 2017, 2018. As a rower, I knew of the Winklevi, and so followed their journey. And I thought, well, I'll just put a little money into it and see what happens. And then I thought, I ran data centers for so long, I can host, and I can put up my own validators and mining facilities. So I started mining in a couple different locations, one in France and then two in the US. And then I realized how much the mining was being done in such a brute force way, and how much was being done on fossil fuels. And it was at that point that I said, you know what, Web3 is the most innovative technology that I've seen in my career, in my lifetime. It's going to have a bigger impact than the internet did. And so I was totally sold on Web3 and on proof of work and the consensus mechanism that it provides, and the security, and all the arguments we know. But I wasn't sold on how they were mining. And one of the things that I've known in any emerging industry is the real successes and the real weaknesses don't emerge until, it starts to go up the hype curve, which is what's been happening. And what I saw was a monopoly on mining machines, and mining machines that were made to run one at a time. And people like Fred and Dave and everyone else who's out there mining, putting hundreds and thousands of them in line, in serial, adding more fans, chasing this diminishing return of air cooling. And I thought, this is exactly like storage was in the 1990s, right? Until EMC came along and they came up with this idea of we only need a small processor and a lot of blades for the storage power. And I said, someone needs to be the EMC of mining on crypto, because there's nothing right now that is one, kind of the supercomputer that's needed and a system that's needed. And then number two, we don't need data centers anymore, right? The data centers should be obsolete, because we need an appliance that can sit at ground zero, sit behind the grid. I think most yWhales know that 62% of energy produced in the United States is lost every year. It's either abandoned or lost through inefficiencies. If you have something sitting at the power generation on the microgrid that can use that energy, then you've got a much more efficient energy system. So my idea was to create the most powerful mining system in the world, and then everyone would want it, and I'll only sell it to people who are going to use it on energy or use it to fund more renewable energy. So that's the genesis of DaVinci, which we took a year and a half in stealth mode to develop our first prototype, and then launched the company back in July.
Well, let's just dive right into DaVinci, what it is, and your first product that you guys have just really debuted.
Yeah, the first product is the DragonFly, which is now it's a box about the size of a refrigerator, and I'm going to take you down into our production facility in a few minutes, and people can have a look at it directly. But it's like a big restaurant-sized Sub-Zero freezer or fridge, and the generation we're working on right now is about 10 petahash for 200,000 for 200 kilowatts. And so it's hyper efficient, and most importantly, it's got really about 70% less electronic waste. So that's super important too, because we're putting less toxic shit out in the environment and creating something that requires a fraction of the maintenance and a fraction of the attention and serviceability. Because the system we've designed basically has 4 immersion tanks, and then 22 blades in each tank, and 1 central control board. Now compare that to a Bitmain or any of the Chinese-made mining machines or mining rigs. They have 3 blades in them, 4 fans, 2 fans on one end, 2 fans on the other, a controller board, and a power board. So all of that extraneous stuff just goes away when we put just a single board in the tank. And those boards are also hot swappable. So right now, if any mining facility wants to do an upgrade, if they want to change from the S19s to the XP, they're literally taking out the whole data center and replacing it. And there's all that electronic waste, there's all that labor to do it, and it's just hyper inefficient. And plus, one thing that I'm particularly proud of, we're the first company made in the USA for mining machines.
That's huge.
So everything we do is right here in Boston, actually Westboro, Mass, about 45 minutes from Boston. And we do all the design, assembly, and everything here except the ASIC chip.
That's really amazing. And, there's a reason why there's only a few places in the world that can make those chips. But to me, this really sounds like a very interesting prospect, and it showcases an evolution in data processing for a variety of reasons, not just because it is modular and mobile, but because it's designed to go somewhere that traditionally data centers don't go, and that's the source of power. We've certainly seen our fair share of containers, air-cooled containers, of which you can go out and buy. And I'm sure there's a few of them are on sale right now with where Bitcoin prices are.
Yeah.
And that was designed specifically for a reason. You can pour a pad with really no construction permit needed. Just here's a concrete pad. The power is less than 100 yards away. Internet is solvable in a variety of different ways because it's Bitcoin. It doesn't need high speed bandwidth.
Yeah.
It just needs power. It needs a lot of power. And when a majority of your power, and you can probably tell me what that percentage is going to just cooling these devices. We've taken a bad situation and made it worse.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just the power and what's called the parasitic load, the load that doesn't directly go to computing, but goes to cooling and goes to managing the system. Excuse me, it's not just that, but it's also the ability to get the maximum performance out of the system. So because we're taking a board that has, again, a lot less electronic waste, right? No heat sinks on it, no fans on it, nothing extraneous. We're taking just the board with 144 ASIC chips on it, dunking it in a cooling fluid, and then shutting it, letting it run. We can run that because it's in immersion cooling. We can run that at 80% higher processing speed than you could if you were air cooling it. And that's the huge advantage from a return on capital perspective.
No, it's massive. Let's take a second and let's just go ahead and hit the, address the elephant in the room, and that is proof of work and energy usage and why. And so I'm going to go ahead and state my theses because, I'm the host, so I get to do so. And then really want to kind of hear from you as someone who's in this industry, and you're very climate focused, you're very environmental focused. My personal viewpoint is proof of work is the best consensus mechanism for blockchain. Still to date, it is not been hacked. It has not had any issues. It has been running entirely hands off with no dev team managing it for over a decade. So proof of work right now has a variety of things there. From an energy standpoint, I don't buy into the FUD of this is a net negative to society or to humanity in any way, shape, or form. I believe that misused, like any tool or any technology, then it can be wasted. Clearly, if you're in a Germany or a country right now that's facing a dire energy crisis, or the state of California, like Bitcoin mining should not be on your list of high priorities. But there's more than enough energy, as you just stated, that's being just not even used, just burnt off. Yeah. I know plenty of people that have oil fields and a variety of, even solar and wind and water, hydro that just quite simply cannot use the power that they have. And that's where Bitcoin and really any other proof of work chain should be focused. But that's my opinion, that I think that there is a responsible way to do this. Talk to me about how DaVinci and DragonFly can help accomplish that.
So Jay, I think there's two super important things that will drive proof of work, and one is greed, and that's always generally the biggest driver, and then two I think is value, and I'll explain both first. Greed is the easiest one. Because if you have the best performing machine out there, and I can produce a Bitcoin for half of what anyone else can produce a Bitcoin, everyone's going to want my machine. Mm-hmm. And so I'll say, I'll say it again, they have to commit to being carbon neutral on their facility if they're going to buy a DragonFly from me. And most renewable energy is significantly cheaper than fossil fuel. So the cheapest energy out there right now is wind energy, on average. Hydro is super cheap as well, and as is solar, but less consistent. But you can see, just thinking about hydro, for instance, Niagara Falls produces just tons and tons of energy, and it's producing the same level 24/7. And you can think about peak demands going up high at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night, and then cutting off for the rest of the evening. And that power is still being produced, but batteries are so expensive, there's no ability to store it. Proof of work, particularly if you're setting something up right behind the grid, before it gets to the grid, proof of work can be a financial battery, right? Because you can take that electricity and you can convert it to digital energy. That's the second part that's super crucial. Most people miss out on. And this is why proof of work is so much better than just a typical data center. And data centers, as you know, use about 3 times the global energy that all of the proof of work consensuses combined use. So it's a better problem to address from the environmental perspective is to address data centers as well as Bitcoin production. And the the fact that we've created this supercomputer system, you can put any board in there. Right now, I happen to be putting in SHA-256 mining boards. But if we wanted to put in AI boards, if we wanted to put in video rendering boards, if we wanted to put in anything else, we could do that on the same system and have it sit behind the grid. But if you think about the idea of digital energy, we're taking electricity and we're converting it to a Bitcoin, which is digital energy and actually has value. We can take that Bitcoin and we can buy a Lamborghini. We can buy a house. We can buy, whatever we happen to want to buy from that digital energy. If I send you an email and I use energy to do it, and I send you, or I do a social post, they have no value. Right, so there's no inherent value in anything that's happening, from a social media perspective, from a communication perspective, but there is from proof of work. And right now, there's 499 coins that are on proof of work. So there's a lot of people, because it's so easy to develop in a way that's super secure and hasn't been hacked. And now the Lightning Network, as you know, is seeing a lot of attention. And here at MIT, where I've got a lot of guys that I've hired out of MIT, they're doing tremendous amount of stuff in the Lightning Network.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot to be said around exactly what you're speaking about, which is you want to responsibly use the energy that's already lost. This isn't something that you need to create entirely new wind farms for. The global hash rates will continue to rise over time, and I think that without us doing the deep dive into hash rates and how Bitcoin really operates, there is a lot of resources that something like the Lightning Network will take that basically allow the hash rate to stay consistent and allow the Lightning Network to take on a lot of that actual use case to do these microtransactions without the heavy mining that would normally be required for a transaction on the Bitcoin network. The way I've seen a couple early videos of DragonFly. The way I equate this is I used to run retail operations. I've got stores all over the country and whatnot. I would never for 1 second think about operating a vending machine. I'm not going to buy it. I'm not going to operate. I'm not going to mess with it. But if somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, you have an unused break room. There's a need for this, that your employees would like this vending machine. We're going to maintain it. We're going to operate it. We're going to make it happen. We're just going to give you a check at the end of the month." That's a very easy proposition. And guess what? That's where how 90% of vending machines around the planet operate is by a singular vendor. That's not exactly your model, but it really does seem consistent that you're trying to take the hard work out of people's hands, where they don't have to have a team on site of people that are blockchain geeks or anything else to maintain these. It's truly almost a self-sealed system, correct?
Yeah, it absolutely is. We think of it as an appliance, Jay, and it is near zero maintenance. So, we haven't had enough in the field experience to get a time to live for pumps or things like that. We just go off of manufacturer specs right now. But the truth of the matter is, we've got more than 100 sensors in each unit. So if something happens, first it automatically tries to correct. And then secondarily, it'll send us a notification of what's happening. So if a board fails or a power supply fails, which are the only real failures that we've seen thus far, someone can go out and literally, as you'll see in a second, just pull a board out without stopping mining, right? So we can hot swap them, take one board out while everything else continues to produce revenue, put the new board in, and that's the type of design that makes this perfect for microgrids. And microgrids are the future of mining and the future of proof of work. So anyone from this family in the mountains of Italy who have a river that they've put a turbine on, to the state of Texas, are creating their own grids and deciding what they're going to do with them, so they can create relationships with vendors like us who say, okay, all the wasted energy, you can flip up over to us automatically when your microgrid doesn't have the demand, and we'll start mining for you.
Yeah.
And so it's fully automated and like I said, near zero maintenance.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. And one of the things that's so important about mining, overall, mining data centers versus, we're just going to focus on Bitcoin mining. I'm not going to get anything else.
Yeah.
Is there's a very big difference between Bitcoin mining and other data center providers. Like if you are saying, hey, I want to do video rendering, hey, I want to do data storage, you have to have an SLA of 99.99% if you're going to even be in a bidding contract for anyone, because no one's going to say, you know what, I only need my data 50% of the time. I only need access to my data on days when there's excess energy. But that's one of the things that is very achievable. And in fact, the industry's norm is if the grid that you're on is in trouble, shut down the Bitcoin. It's entirely fine.
Yeah.
It's not going to hurt anything.
Yeah. That's 100%. There's a couple applications like that, Jay, but you're 100% right. I'm plugging in here so I don't lose this. But you're 100% right on the ability to shut down without any penalty. And so that provides you with a mechanism to do a couple of things. I know there are some power plants, particularly like Wyoming and Montana, where Compute North has some of their facilities where if they were to shut down out of demand, it would cost them more to spin back up to get to their sort of base tier of power production. So what they're doing is using that base tier of power production when there's no demand. It was just going literally out the pipe. And so now they've got Bitcoin mining capability in there that is used at that level when there's nothing else. So that even though it's not a green situation, they're saving that external additional energy that you'd take to restart things again, because the Bitcoin mining's keeping it consistent. So there's a lot of use cases like that.
Patrick, one of the things we hear constantly, and it's over and over and over, is this argument that there's no real value for Bitcoin, that it's just a bunch of computer algorithms that can be shut off at any given time. But we've seen now over a decade of innovation. We've seen now over a decade of use case, and to be clear, Bitcoin has over the last decade, outperformed almost any other asset class, and then by itself, because even at $20,000, which is where it sits today, they were a fraction of a cent when launched, with no inherent value. And today, there's still not a lot of usage. What's when people kind of give you that hey, there's no use for this? What's your response? Because I'm sure you hear it a lot.
Yeah. So the question is, there's no use for it. My initial response is always, there's somebody I can go to right now and trade my Bitcoin for any currency in the world. It doesn't matter what it is. Pick a currency. I'll take one of my Bitcoins and I'll trade it for it. Because there's enough people who believe that digital energy, that thing that cost money to produce, so it has an actual cost, is worth something. Just like a piece of paper that happens to have some fancy stamping that's difficult to copy has worth to people who believe it has worth. And so it's no different, because there are people who believe that it has value. Now, JP Morgan did a really interesting study that they looked at all the costs that go into a Bitcoin. And they said, we can determine fundamentally that because the hash rate, global hash rate is going up, the mining difficulty is going up, your share of mining for this amount of computing power is going down, we can determine that at every stage in the growth of Bitcoin, there was a cost associated with it. And a lot of people think that if the current market price goes too high above the cost, that there's a market imbalance, which there was last year when it hit 63 or 64 or whatever it hit. JP Morgan was saying, the cost with today's energy prices and everything else, we shouldn't be buying these for more than 35. And so you can look at it as an actual cost to produce it add a profit margin on top of it, and that should be sort of your market range. So that's a very easy way for people in the financial market to comprehend the value behind a Bitcoin.
You know, Patrick, that's a really interesting perspective in there. And we've always looked for where is Bitcoin going to kind of level off? Where are we going to see some of the volatility? And again, volatility is fine from a certain perspective, but, you know, being able to move or drop or crash by, 10, 20, 30% in a couple hours, it's not that's a tough asset class. It's a tough, asset to buy. Do you think that, Bitcoin will possibly, instead of being, a virtual gold, will be kind of converted to a virtual energy, virtual store of energy, and that would level off the price?
Well, I think what levels off the price, Jay, is an agreement on cost of energy usage, right? Cost to develop that, and a proxy for that is market cap. Right. So right now the market cap is low enough that we have big swings in different directions. Right. Yep. And those big swings, people who are speculators, gamblers, are playing off those. And there are people, trading by the minute, trading by the second, who are going on the swings of Bitcoin. And those people go away when we get to market stability for Bitcoin. But the price goes up significantly. And most importantly, it's not affected by all the global turmoil that's going on now. We've got 10% inflation rate in the EU. We've got, Ukraine and Russia trying to, resort back to the old USSR. So we have all these things going on in the world that are affecting the global economy. And people don't know if Brexit is causing, problems in the UK, if it's a new prime minister. It doesn't matter what it is, because Bitcoin will become a protection, certainly against hyperinflation. It might not, because it's susceptible to market sentiment like any other investment. It might not become a hedge against normal 3, 4, 5% inflation, but against hyperinflation, it most definitely is. And we've seen that, right, the past 3 or 4 months. It has been between 19 and 23 for 3 or 4 months, when when everything else, your $1 million house is dropping in value by $10,000 a month. Yep. Right? If we have 10% inflation, it's dropping, $100,000 a year.
Yep. No, it's very, there's a lot of conversations around that. All right. So Patrick is on the move. We took a pause on a recording right here. He is mobilized, and he is now in his evil lair, getting ready to show us some of the first working prototype of DragonFly. So we talked about it. And now here we are with Patrick, and I can let him kind of intro what we're looking at and how this operates.
All right, thanks, Jay. I wanted to come show one of the units that we've got in the process of being built. And this is an air-cooled unit, so it has its own heat exchanger, and it can freestand anywhere up to 45 degrees centigrade. So there's 4 compartments. Each compartment has an immersion tank, and they have printed circuit boards that you just change out. That's such a key thing. So the rest of this infrastructure here always stays in place, even when new ASIC chips come out. The only thing that's switched are in here. You'll see in just a second these little boards, the printed circuit boards with about 144 ASICs on each board by our design. So this, in the current instantiation that we're selling, is about 10 petahash of output. So it's the equivalent of something like 70 of the latest Bitmain XPs. But when we go to upgrade, and when anyone who's using one of these things upgrades, they aren't throwing out the entire reader and fans and all that toxic electronic waste. This is so much more efficient because all this infrastructure stays in place. Again, this one's freestanding, completely self-contained, nearly zero maintenance, and I'll show you what we're doing in terms of putting on the power supplies, because we've got a tremendous amount of redundancy with each power supply. So these power supplies that we're using, and this is actually what's happening here, is the cooling fluid is doing a liquid to liquid heat exchange. So we've got water pumping through it that's getting cooled off by these fans that you hear. And then we've got dielectric fluid that gets cooled by that cold water. last thing I want to show you, which is super cool, is the setup of each tank. So each individual tank has, in Gen 2, has a single control board. This is super efficient, not just from a parasitic load, meaning reducing efficiency, but also from the ability to hot swap anything. So we can run 22 boards in each tank with one controller. So normally in a first generation setup or in a Bitmain setup, that would be anywhere from let's see, 22 boards would be like 7 controllers, or in an overclocking situation, it would be 44 controllers. So we're able to go from 44 controllers inside the Gen 1s down to 4 with the new tank. And the other thing about the boards is they're all completely hot swappable. The board pops out. The power and communication are all internally routed and closed, so there's no extraneous wiring. It's really a super elegant design. So let me walk a little bit away from the machine now because it's so damn loud. But that's the design is really much more efficient, significantly more environmentally friendly because a lot lower waste and near zero maintenance. So it's really the way that mining should be done. And you can drop one of those things. You don't have to build a data center. You don't have to put in any infrastructure. You just find some place to plug it in and it starts mining. So it's really a cool design.
Patrick, I mean, really amazing technology that you guys have put together. I mean, DragonFly, the concept that you can have a self-sealed, remotely managed system that has the levels of redundancy that you guys have built in, as well as the efficiencies to energy usage, e-waste. I hope that the entire industry copies what you're doing and goes in that direction. Oh, I would love to see you build as many of these as possible and have global, kind of global dominance. It really does showcase that you can take 3 steps back and really look at the problem from a very different perspective and use a similar answer, but in a much more elegant solution.
And Jay, there's a couple things to it. The elegant solution in the system approach in a self-contained unit. I mean, that's a huge differentiator. But even the manufacturing, some of the guys you saw down there, the capability. Our first gen, we were using Bitmain boards, right? We're using S19 boards and overclocking those. The Gen 2 that you just saw is significantly more efficient from an energy perspective, but there's also 3 or 4 other things that are really important. It's the only board that's designed for immersion, right? So the other boards you've seen have heat sinks on them and systems that are designed to be air cooled, and ours is the first that's designed for immersion. One of the problems we've seen with the Bitmain is we classify each one into 3 performance categories. So there can be as much difference in the same hashing board using the same energy. There can be as much as 50% hashing difference. So we classify them into A, B, and C based on their level of performance. And the reason is pure and simple. It's shitty manufacturing and QA, right? They're just pumping out as many as they can, and they don't care about performance because people are buying them hand over fist, and most people aren't going to take the time to segregate them like that. So there's a number of big advantages that we have, with this immersion only, made in the USA, really transparent in how we do things. And so I do think it's the model going forward, and I do hope we get some competition as well because there's plenty to go around.
Yeah, it's absolutely fabulous. So today I'm just going to ask, these are a couple of Bitcoin questions, and I'm not really going any particular direction with it, but Bitcoin moves at about 12 transactions per second.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
So it might be a little bit more now, but yeah.
Yeah, incredibly slow. Like we're, Ethereum is working their way up, but Solana is going
off
after 500,000 transactions per second. I think they prior to one of their crashes. They hit about 400,000 and became unstable and goes. But when we're talking about Bitcoin, at 12, let's double it to 24. Let's even double that again to maybe 50. It's not designed to move at the speed of a true global economy. It's designed for security, redundancy, and reliability. That's where all the sudden
and Jay, it's designed for scalability.
True.
Right. So it can get significantly bigger. That's one of the areas where some of the L1s, on other coins have difficulty. They might be fast, but they can only be fast to a certain threshold.
Yeah. And the point is that, there's ways to scale Bitcoin and the Bitcoin network through Lightning and other level 2s and level 0s, which is where we need to go. And we need to remove some of the brute force, nonsense, attacking the level 1.
Yeah, not everyone needs the global consensus network of Bitcoin. And I think that's an important thing for people to realize. If you're running a blockchain to keep track of your supply chain or the the beds in your hospital or whatever, there's a ton of great uses for blockchain, but they don't have to be on the world's most secure network, right? And any more than you and I need to be talking in a SCIF, which is a secure compartmentalized information facility that DoD uses, right? Those are only required for certain instances, and we're not one of them. I think of Bitcoin very much like that. It is super scalable, right? They can continue to get trillions of dollars in market cap and the consummate transactions with that. But it's not something that everyone needs to be on. So yeah, the Lightning Network and some of the L2s and ideas around L2s are really interesting that are coming out.
Patrick, what's the roadmap look like for the next 6 to 12 months for you guys?
For us, it really looks like laying down a nanometer less with every 8 to 12 months. So in the mining world, the efficiency comes with the size of the chip. And right now you've got, everyone from some of the older models, which are maybe 24 nanometers, to the newer ones coming out are 7 nanometers. So we've got a global roadmap, both with our own chip design and our own chip designers, and with a bunch of really great partners to go, 11, 7, 5, 3, and then see what happens after that. So for us, we're an innovation company. And my goal is twofold. One is to get us up to a reasonable size and then turn over the helm to a CEO who really wants to scale and build this up into something amazing. And then I'm going to start a nonprofit arm of DaVinci where we give the older generation units to countries or municipalities that want to use them to fund renewable energy. So I want to take the old boards and the ones that are replaced by Gen 2 and Gen 3 and give them to countries that want to pay for hydro plants or pay for geothermal or pay for wind farms. So that might be the 3-year vision rather than the 6 to 12 month vision.
Listen, it all depends on when the next bull run hits, and if you're able to time this right and produce those in time. And again, Bitmain and all these other guys, it doesn't mean that they were the best that was out there. They were the only ones that could. They were the ones that could produce.
Yeah, they were the only ones that could produce. And an interesting thing now, Jay, and the reason I'm so excited about this and putting so much of my own resources into it is the best time to build infrastructure is at the late side of a bear market, right? So if we've got the infrastructure perfected, if we've got things really ready to rock and roll at the end of Q1, beginning Q2, which is when I think we start to see another bull run, then we're going to be poised to take advantage of everybody out there when it comes to competitiveness for mining, because we'll be so much more efficient.
Love it. Again, thank you so much for the tour. Thank you for everything that you brought, the insights and whatnot, Patrick. If people want to know more, they want to learn more, or they'd like to get themselves on the list for a DragonFly unit, where's the best way to get a hold of you guys?
So the website's the best way. It's DaVinci 3.0. And what we're doing, we've got a real transparent process. If you want a unit, you go in, sign up, say how many units you want, when you want them delivered. We'll come back and tell you where you are on our waiting list. And then you've got 45 days to do due diligence. Come to our facility here in Boston. Look at our data and all the historical stuff. and then you have to put a 50% deposit down. So it's everything's real open and transparent, and we just want to make sure that we're the best mining company out there for people who want to scale and really want no maintenance and a hands-off approach.
Love it. Love it. And I already know the answer is no, but I'd say I'd love to have one. I can put it in my building here because I have 4 cent energy. But per your earlier statements, we're coal powered here. So the cheap power is great, but does not serve your guys' mission, vision, values. So I don't get to have one.
Put some solar panels on the roof, Jay, and I'll send you one next week.
Sold.
You'll cut the line.
Perfect. yWhales, again, this is Patrick Sweeney, DaVinci and DragonFly. Thank you so much for swinging by, and really excited to see where this goes in the future. We're 100% going to be doing a follow-up probably early next year once you got a few of these in the field. And thank you again for your time. yWhales.
All right.
We'll catch you guys next time.
All right. Thanks, yWhales.